Ava Gardner at the time was on and off with Frank Sinatra. Peter was Jack Kennedy's brother-in-law. He married Pat Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's sister. And by the way, I shook hands with John Kennedy. Peter Lawford made arrangements to have Jack Kennedy stay at Frank Sinatra's mansion. Peter had a date with her one night. He's having dinner with her at Chasen's. The maitre d' brought a phone over to the table and said, "Mr. Lawford, there's a call for you." Put the phone down, plugged it in. "Hello?" It was Frank. Says, "You ever date her again, I'm going to have your legs broken." And he hung up. I got backstage in my dressing room, and the maitre d' came back and gave me the card and said, "Lucille Ball wants you to come to her party." And one thing Lucille did not want to talk about offstage or offset was show business. I probably embalmed about 2,000 people in my schooling years. Where we flew every day to a new place in the world, every day.
What's your name?
Jac Hayden.
And Jack, what is it that you do? Well, first off, how old are you?
85.
And what is it you do?
Not much at 85.
Well, how the hell do you know when you're done?
Well, I'll tell you what. The hours are good.
Stick it where? Oh, my dear. It's got thorns that'll hurt. Well, that's kind of the way I feel tonight. How do the rest of you folks feel? That bad. That bad. Well, the cast warned me that you were out here, so I'm ready for you. We've been checking you all through a hole in the curtain over there. You look pretty darn good. More important than that, you smell good, packed in here like humans. Really, that's important. We do get some stinkers in here from time to time, but you smell nice. Of course, you got all that perfume and cologne and peppermint douche and everything in one room. That's a hell of an odor. Everybody take a deep breath. Doesn't that smell good? Except one or two of you. Pine sol with ammonia, right? I think you're supposed to clean the bathroom with that. I'm not sure. In any event, before we get to this crap, they've asked me to make this announcement. This is rather important. There is now paper in the ladies' room for those of you who got caught in there without paper, and that would be you, friend, with the wet hands. You got caught in there without paper, didn't you? Yes, he did. I saw him in there earlier. I didn't recognize you, all zipped up there. I never forget those little things. I use the ladies' room all the time here. You meet a much nicer crowd in there, don't you? Aren't they pleasant? Don't get up, madam. I just came in to wash my hands. They're very nice. In fact, we invite all of you gentlemen to visit our ladies' room. Really, casually stroll in there anytime you feel like it. Tell them I sent you. Perhaps you'll get a better seat. Forget the men's room. It's totally boring. There's nothing to read on the walls, so you go in there to wee-wee. It's the ladies who write on the walls all the time in the ladies' room. We finally figured it out. It's because they've got both hands free. She knows it. That one right there. Look at her face. Well, in spite of you folks, I feel especially good tonight. Really, I just came back from a pleasure trip. I took my wife back to her mother. Yeah, what a pleasure. Some of you have done that before, apparently. You two married? Engaged? Just shacking up. One says yes, the other says no, they're shacking up. Bless you both. It's all right, I do it whenever I can myself, which really isn't too often lately. You two are married, of course. You must be. You look miserable as hell. How long have you been married? How long, dear? She's pretty, but she's awfully stupid. How long have you been married? 18 years. Could we have a groan for 18 years? Oh, ain't life full of pits? 18 years. How many children, dear? 2 in 18 years. Hell, I'm single and I do better than that, Does he work nights, darling? Yeah, well, that'll do it. Well, sweetheart, I can't pass you up any longer. I see your specimen came back. Good Lord, it's got ice in it, too. Is she a little frigid, is she? Yeah. Boy, that is cloudy, darling. You gotta run it through again, dear. Maybe it'll clear up, I don't know. Friend, I'd stay away from her for a while. God knows what she's got there. I recommend 4 or 5 nights by hand. You'll be all right. You having a good time, dear? Yeah, I hope so. You look like you need one.
Okay, so where are you from, Jack?
Upstate New York,
And
11 miles from Syracuse.
Okay, and what? Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about growing up, and what'd you go to school for? And
Well, I grew up, of course, other way could you grow but up, you know. I was born very close to my mother. And when I was born, my mother took a look at me and they took her to the hospital. Where was I born? I was born in Phoenix, New York. I went to grade school and high school in Hannibal, New York, a little town upstate New York still. And when I graduated, then I went to New York City. I graduated, I think I was 16 years old from high school. And I enrolled in a College of Mortuary Science at the age of 17 in New York City. So I moved to New York, went to mortuary school. Now here I am, a 17-year-old boy. I don't think I had ever seen a corpse before. And a 17-year-old being taught how to embalm a dead body, that's pretty bizarre. And I had emotions about it. I wanted something clinical. Was too lazy to become a doctor. That's too many years. I didn't have the right walk to be a nurse. So mortician or a veterinarian was the choice. And I didn't want to work with live animals either. So I figured, well, they're dead. I can't hurt them. So I stayed in mortuary college, even though at 17, corpses were very foreign to me. And the thought of it was kind of also a bit repugnant. I had to get used to it, as anyone else would, I think. That was normal. And I graduated, served my residency, did a lot of funerals. I probably embalmed about 2,000 people in my schooling years. And then when I finally took the state board exam in New York and became a licensed mortician, I then joined the Air Force because all my buddies had been in and out of uniforms serving the country, and I felt that it was my time to do the same. My high school buddies were all military. Even the boys I went to mortuary school with, they were all ex-GIs. They were going under the GI Bill at that time, was paying for their education. So they had all been in the military, the Marines and the Navy and so forth. So I felt that it was time for me to put on a uniform and serve the country, give a little back, you know. So I joined the Air Force, which is the best move I ever made in my life. I loved being in the Air Force because I was in special services, which is television, radio, stage shows, traveling shows, and so forth. And that's all I did in the Air Force, was entertain for the 4 years. And was well rewarded for it, too. And it was wonderful being part of the Air Force entertainment program. I did television, radio, and stage shows, and a world tour. So that's
what was that called?
Well, the world tour was called Tops in Blue, and I produced my own show for the Air Force called Review in Blue, and various shows. I did a lot. Actually, a nice thing about that for me in my memory is it just came to me again. While I was touring the world with Tops in Blue, the Air Force officer in charge, now I was the master of ceremonies of the show. I was second drummer in the Tops in Blue orchestra because during one act I had to play the drums because the drummer had to leave the drums to go out front stage to be in one of the acts. He was a comedian. So being that I played drums in a high school band, high school orchestra, and marching band, I was second drummer for the Tops in Blue Orchestra, which was fun. The only big band I ever played with. And I did his act. I did drums in his act. But the officer in charge, our liaison officer who traveled with us around the world, we flew every day to a new place in the world, every day.
What about the place where they put paper on the airplane windows?
Oh, yeah. Well, we had to have, first of all, before we were assigned to Tops in Blue, before the show took off, we had FBI investigations on all of us to be sure that we were bona fide citizens dedicated to the country and all, and had nothing in our past that was questionable. And there were 29 of us in that cast. It was like a big Broadway show. And we went to a lot of places that were very, very classified. In fact, I remember once we did a show on a Navy aircraft carrier. I think it was the Guadalcanal or something like that. And they had taken big tarps and covered all the kind of stuff mounted on the outer deck. Stuff that we shouldn't have seen because we didn't have clearance to see it. Probably rocket launchers at that time or something like that, you know. But I remember once in the South Pacific, we were headed for Kwajalein or Eniwetok, little islands in the South Pacific, because there's a radar station there, or maybe 300 airmen stationed there for half of their life, and only airmen, and they had nothing. So the show was scheduled to stop to a lot of places like that to give the guys a taste of home. Here we are, American entertainers. We were like dropped out of the sky, literally, for them. And they, FBI agents who flew with us sometimes, or CIA agents even, at that time, would corral us in areas where we weren't supposed to go out of that area, where they had to guide us, because we weren't classified to see some of the stuff that was there, which was all armament, you know. So they, once we were headed for, I think it was Kwajalein in the South Pacific, and the FBI agents had a big roll of brown mailing paper, and they taped the windows of the aircraft, taped all the windows with this brown paper so we couldn't see what we were flying over. Stuff we weren't supposed to see. We were cleared by the FBI and had a secret clearance, but we didn't have top secret, which was a different classification. And I remember that. So when we took off after that show, I remember we landed, and out on the runway, the Air Force had backed 2 flatbed trucks, big flatbed 18-wheelers, back to back, and that was our stage right out there on the runway. We got out of the airplane, jumped on that truck and did our show, set up the band and all. And when we were through, we jumped off the truck back into the airplane. We took off again, and then the FBI agents decided to show us something. So the plane was circling around a big circle. He instructed the pilot to do that, and the agents took, 2 of these agents took all the paper off the windows, and we saw, as we tilted and went around in a big circle, great big dark spot in the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. It's probably like 6 or 7 city blocks big, maybe more. Big. It was very obvious, and just as black gets. And the FBI agent said that used to be an island. We took care of it, and then we took off. But we had other areas like that. But the point I was trying to get to earlier was the Air Force officer in charge of us, who traveled with us, Lieutenant Perel, because I was the magician on the show, I was the master of ceremonies, second drummer, and magician. And also because I was then a licensed mortician, I was also the medic for the troop. And whenever we landed someplace and I had in the cast, I had somebody with an ailment, I, as the medic, took them to the hospital, and we jumped all the lines, whoever's waiting for any treatment, because we were only there for a few hours. So I had to get my person treated. And we did go to a hospital once in a while and get some aspirin, whatever, penicillin shots. I could have actually given them the shots. I was licensed to do that, but the Air Force didn't want me to do that. So the lieutenant said, because you're a magician, why don't you do something, a gift from the people of the United States to the people of this particular armpit area of the earth where we were landing. Said, I'll make arrangements. We do our show on stage for the airmen, and I'll make arrangements with the local orphanage that you do a magic show for the children there. And I did many of those in Free China and Japan, and a lot in the Orient, Korea. And the kids had never seen a live magician. They had seen them on television, of course, but here I am. So I say, yeah, I'd be glad to do that. So as a magician, I entertained orphans pretty much around the world. And that was, to me, my little contribution, my giving back, you know.
How about the time you met Bob Hope? When you first met him, I should say.
That was in the Far East. I don't remember where. I think it was Korea. He was, Bob Hope at that time, I'm talking many years ago now, was touring the world all the time, entertaining troops. That was his big contribution, which was, I don't think nobody's ever matched what he did, the troops. Nobody. And he always had a couple of stars with him, you know, like Jerry Colonna, Les Brown in the band and all. And I think we first hooked up. I have a newspaper with my picture and Bob Hope's picture with the headlines, Tops in Blue joins or meets Bob Hope or something like that. I have that newspaper somewhere. No, I don't. It was in my files. It's been thrown away. And the second time was in St. Paul, Minnesota, a little town across the river from St. Paul called Lilydale.
We have the picture of you and Bob Hope on stage.
That's one. I had several.
Okay.
One thing I did lose in my files, which are gone, was a wonderful 8x10 picture. When I was finished, it was signed by Bob Hope. Said, "To Jack, thanks for the memory, Bob Hope." I lost that picture. It was an 8x10. It was beautiful, but it's gone. Lilydale, little town, little crossroads town. I don't even think they had a traffic light, but there was a club there, a very famous club called Diamond Jim's. It was the original club owned by famous Lillian Russell of the past and Diamond Jim Brady. It was their club. In fact, the original license signed by both of them was on the wall behind the bar. So, why was I going there?
We were talking about Bob Hope.
Yeah, oh yeah. I produced a show there called Mississippi Mud, because the club was right on the bank of the Mississippi. Wearing my sister's teeth, and they don't fit too well. You can't order these things by mail, let me tell you. You got to go and get for a fitting, really. But I produced a show called Mississippi Mud for that club with dancers, a band, and it was a good small stage show. And I starred myself in it. And we ran there for months for that show that I produced. Well, Bob Hope was across the river in Minneapolis getting some kind of an award at a war memorial building that just opened or something like that. So as it wound up, he wound up at Diamond Jim's, the club, was just a supper club, for dinner. And I'm preparing the stage for the show, and I'm looking over at the buffet line, and there's Bob Hope filling his plate. As it wound up, they seated him at ringside to see our show, of course, and he remembered me, I guess, because I'm doing my magic act. I'm doing things with ropes and silks and da-da-da-da, and I'm singing his theme song. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm singing Thanks for the Memory, and he's smiling at me, looking at me. He's right at ringside. The stage was no higher than this table. So he did this. I went over and I leaned down, and he said in a stage whisper, which is really a loud voice so the audience can hear, but it sounds like a loud whisper. He said, "My lawyers are bigger than your lawyers." And I stopped singing Thanks for the Memory. The next time I saw Bob Hope, the picture that you have, a show called Beautiful People. It was at the El San Juan Hotel, the Club Tropicoro. And Bob Hope was making a movie in Puerto Rico with Sophia Loren, who I met there. She was in the club to see our show too. Sophia Loren, at the top of her beauty, that was years ago. And he was in the audience. So I invited him up to speak and so forth. And that's the last time I ever saw Bob Hope. He was really a wonderful man, and he was very polite, very kind to me, very nice. I had only one line. As the picture that you have, I think, I'm standing next to Bob Hope, and I'm in white tie and tails, very formal. And for years, Bob Hope was the master of ceremonies of the Oscars show, the Academy Awards, and he always wore white tie and tails. I had only one line, but I used it well. Actually, I had two lines. And he'd look at me and he'd say, gee, that looks like my old Academy Awards suit. And I'd flop the coat open. I'd supposedly read the label and say, I think it is, Bob. It's a rental. All right. My other line was, while talking, I'm so hoarse I could draw a wagon. A laugh I wasn't supposed to get, but I got it anyway. But he was a nice man. He was very polite, he realized who he was, a world-class star. He knew who he was, but it wasn't an ego trip with him. He was just happened to be a very talented comic who got lots and lots of breaks, and it made a career for him. And of course, what really made him, I think, is his tour for the troops in every war. World War II, Korea.
So after you
even Desert Storm, he was in that.
Yeah.
In Vietnam, he entertained Vietnamese troops. So he was a wonderful man, and he lived to be 101, and he performed right up until the end.
So after you got out of the Air Force and you went into the mortuary business.
For a while, I had to. When I was discharged from the Air Force, my last show that I produced was in Fairbanks, Alaska, and my star was Robert Ryan from Warner Brothers, movie star from Warner Brothers, Robert Ryan. He made 100 movies. And I flew down to Tacoma, Washington, where I was discharged from the Air Force. They put money in my pocket to get me home. And I'm a civilian all of a sudden. I walked out the door free. So I didn't have a job. I was home with my parents, obviously. I had no home either of my own. So I didn't have a job, didn't have any money, I didn't have a car. I had to start from zero. So I took a job in a funeral home in New York City to earn some money to get a bank account going and buy a car and get going. Civilian clothing alone, So I did work in a funeral home for a while to get established, and then when I felt that I was secure enough, I went to Boston. I got my first manager, Benny Dennis, who is now deceased, and he put me with a lot of stars and a lot of ocean liners, and I got on my way. And that's how it all started for my civilian performing. I found a little bit of a transition period between performing for military, soldiers and sailors, to civilian audiences. There was a little difference. What you could do for the military for a show didn't work for a nightclub. So I had a little bit of a learning period there. And I think there was times when I wasn't all that good, but I got good real fast. I don't mean that in the interest of vanity, but I did become a very good actor. That's why the stars that I worked with, 30 stars, major stars, liked what I did, because I did make a concerted effort to get better as a performer. Because here I am with a crutch kind of an act, a magic act. That's a crutch to lean on stage. When you got no other talent, you're a magician, So I made a concerted effort. I'm going to get good, and I again, not vanity, but I think I did, because the stars liked what I did, and my manager, Benny Dennis, kept putting me with stars. My first star as a civilian, I worked with Alice Lon at the B&B Supper Club, which probably doesn't exist anymore, in Indianapolis, I think it was. Alice Lon was Lawrence Welk's champagne lady on television on the Lawrence Welk show. She used to dance with him and sing. Alice was wonderful. She used to write to me after we did our show when we parted. She had a husband and a son. She wrote to me a few letters, and then the letters stopped. I assume she passed away. But Alice Lon was my first star as a civilian performer. And then from there, it was many stars. Jan Murray and, all kinds of, Rosemary Clooney, all kinds of people. Wonderful people I never expected to meet. And I'm working with them. But that's because I didn't take my act, so to speak. I didn't take my performances casually. I worked hard at getting the laugh out of every single line I could, everything had a laugh line to me. Like, a cop stopped me the other day, accused me of going 70 miles an hour. I wasn't even out an hour. I take every single line I did on stage and put a joke on the end of it. And that's how I developed into a comic who's got a head full of 1,000 jokes.
Tell me about the time that the body fell out of the back of the hearse.
No, it didn't fall out of the back of a hearse. It fell out of the side of a limousine. Yeah, I wish I had that picture I was going to show it to you, but I will find it and I'll show it to you. A 1948 Cadillac. I'm serving my residency in California at a mortuary there. I don't think I should say the name, maybe. No, I shouldn't, because I was picking up a body for them. And, it was the wife of a clergyman. So we went to Bob Nuger, who was just out of the Marine Corps. He was a licensed mortician. And we were called to go and pick up a body in a private home. And they used a 1948 Cadillac limousine, model 75, where the doors, the passenger door and the rear door for the passengers, closed to each other. When you opened up both of those doors, the whole side of the car was open. They sawed off the post between the doors and welded it to the back door and put latches on the bottom and the top. So when you closed it, it latched, but the post was welded to the back door, and when you opened both of those doors, the entire side of the car was open, where we could put a stretcher in there, because they had cut the front seat in half. They took the passenger seat out, and they cut the back seat in half, so that from the dashboard to the trunk was, with the grabbers, that's where the Baumgartner stretcher would go.
Why not just a hearse?
Why
wouldn't they just use a hearse?
I don't know.
Is it something about the highways? You're able to get on the highways?
Oh yes, that's true. I do know.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to prompt my memory once in a while.
It's okay. You're 85 years old. I don't expect you to remember everything.
I used to tell my audiences in Prim. I performed at Prim for 8 years in the shows there. Long time, long run. And I used to come out and tell them, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack. I'm 32 years old, and I have no apprehension about saying that because I was born 85 years ago. This is an old instrument. It's got a booster battery. I have to kick it on or it won't work. All my instruments are old. Shut up. You bet I couldn't have repaired. So, this is for your anniversary. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary. Well, that one was great. With your 5 kids. Happy anniversary to you. Some applause for their anniversary. But it's true that we had hearses in the garage. I think the funeral home owned 3 hearses, but they had already had for many years these 48 Cadillac limousines that would house a stretcher, so they used them. So Bob and I are out on the road with this thing, and we got a stretcher, and I'm sitting in what's left, the back half of the back seat, as the riding shotgun is what they call it, and Nuger is driving. And we stopped at this house. We were met by the clergyman. His wife had passed away. She's in the bedroom in bed. We went in there, and like many corpses, she was naked in bed, dead, and she weighed 300 pounds. So Bob and I, as morticians, we were used to this kind of thing. We faced with it before, we don't mull over it. We just do the job that needs to be done. So we wrapped her in one of her own sheets, picked her up, and got her on the stretcher. More like rolled her off the bed onto the stretcher, which was bed high. The stretcher is adjustable. Wheeled her down out of the house and opened the doors and put her in this Cadillac limousine The whole side of the car was open. So they closed it. Now, a Cadillac limousine of that era, that Cadillac had kind of a bread truck chassis. It was a big chassis. And we were in Los Angeles. We had to cross Pico Boulevard to get to the funeral home. Pico Boulevard had about 5, maybe 6 trolley car tracks. Some going this way, 3 going that way, and 3 going that way with a small island in between. Well, there was a turn where we could go across the tracks. We did that. And when you hit a bump with that limousine, that frame, like any car, would spring a little bit. The frames are meant to spring to take care of shock. That frame on that Cadillac, when it sprung, the doors flew open. I'm sitting on the seat behind the driver, and I reached out to grab that stretcher. I didn't get it. Right out it went. Turned over, and the body rolled down the trolley tracks. Cars came screeching to a halt. 2 trolley cars had to stop. A bus stopped. People are hanging out their window of apartments looking down at this naked woman on the trolley tracks. And Bob and I, we were roughly the same age. We were probably 22 or 24 years old, somewhere. And we got laughing because at that age, you laugh. It wasn't disrespect of the dead, the laughter. It was just, oh, Bob, what are we going to do? We got out and we were laughing so hard we couldn't pick her up. Because when you pick up a 300-pound body from street level up on a stretcher as high as that table, you can hardly do that, especially when you're laughing and you're trying to suppress the laugh. You don't want people around you to see you laughing doing this. We're biting our tongue and snorting out our nose and everything else. So finally, 2 trolley car drivers and a taxi cab driver come out, and they saw we were in a mess, and they helped us pick her up, put her back on the stretcher into the car. We got her back to the funeral home, backed into the garage area where we unload, wheeled the stretcher into the mortuary, and got her up on the embalming table, or actually the preparation table to disrobe them or wash them. Sometimes we disinfect them if we feel they have lice or anything like that, and they do sometimes. The chief embalmer, I won't say his name, came in and saw her, and here she's got trolley track rust spots all over her, grease, lots of grease, dirt. He said, "What did you do to her?" I said, "We didn't do it. That's the way we got her off her bed, and we passed it off that way." I'll never ever forget that scene, and we finally stopped laughing. Oh, Bob, who was driving, was real smart, smarter than I was. He was faster than I was. In the door windows of the limousine is the name of the funeral home in nice little shiny metal letters like you'd see in a hearse. There they are in the windows. When he saw that stretcher go out, he said, "Grab the name, please." That's the first thing he said. So in each window, I grabbed him, take him so they couldn't see which funeral home it was. That saved us, I think, because the funeral home would have had 1,000 calls. "What are you guys doing with your son?" That was the first thing. I'm watching the stretch, her rolling down the tracks, and I'm grabbing the plates out of the window, which was a smart move. I'm glad Bob thought of that because I wouldn't have, But that's only one incident of working in a funeral parlor, and there are others.
What about what's the weirdest, being in a funeral home has to be kind of spooky.
It is a bit creepy. In fact, when I signed up in mortuary school, I took a job in a funeral home in the Bronx. I won't say the name of that still exists. And I took a job in the funeral home for being a night man, even though I was only a student mortician. I wasn't licensed. But they put me in there to answer the phone at night when calls come in, because calls come in for deaths all hours of the night. Death doesn't stop at 11 p.m. 3:30 in the morning, you get a call. You got to call in a licensed man, and they get the hearse and go with him, ride shotgun to pick up the body. So I lived in the back of this funeral home, a room about half the size of a normal hotel room. It was a room with a single bed, a closet, a small closet, a table, and a chair. And I'm sleeping like crazy, going probably in my first week, getting up in the morning, getting on the subway, going down to Manhattan, go to mortuary school all day. And then I'd come home from school and I'd be on duty as this phone answering guy, or answer the front door. Sometimes they come to the front door at night, bang on the door, ring the bell when somebody has died. I woke up one morning and I'm hearing this drone muttering, and I'm on my bed towards the wall right here. And I hear this behind me, and I turn around and look, and they had set a prayer rail by my bed, and two candelabras and two embalmers were kneeling on the prayer rail saying prayers over me. Well, what? You know, I left that room by way of the window. I took the window sash with me. I didn't intend to, but it was handier to take the window sash with me when I jumped out the window. But they were a bunch of clowns. Funeral directors are not as sedate as you think they are. They're normal people. They have a sense of humor. They live. They have feelings. Well, they're human beings. So we can't just be like the movie portrays Undertakers as, you know, some kind of a zombie sort of character to be frightened of. No, all bombers I know are, and men and women both, normal people with a normal life. So we have a sense of humor. We exercise it, but we don't do it, I swear to God, we don't. I never would think any mortician would do it in disrespect to the deceased. That we held in reverence. It's the other part of the business that things happen.
So you got any funeral parlor or Undertaker jokes?
Yeah, a woman came in one day. We took her into the reposing room. She wanted to view her husband before she invited the people in to be sure everything was okay, the cosmetics were right and all that. And so she said, "Oh, I brought you a gray suit for my husband, and he's in a dark blue suit. Whose suit is that?" We said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We do get mixed up once in a while when we're real busy. We'll fix that." I closed the door. She waited out in the foyer. In about a minute and a half, I opened up. Said, "Okay, ready." And she went in, and he's got his gray suit. I said, "My God, that's fast. How did you do that?" She said, "Well, we don't change the suit. We just change the heads."
All right, so you met Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm. I was performing at the Eden Rock Hotel in Miami Beach with a show called Flesh and Feathers, produced here. Good-sized show, and we had a big house orchestra that night. It was a wonderful band, one of the best bands that ever backed to show up, I think. There was probably 18 or 20 guys, all young guys, who played those instruments like crazy. They were real good. And I'm performing my stupid act called Mundane the Great. I'm doing magic. I'm cutting a rope or paper bag or something. And I look down at the front of the club at the entrance, and I see the maitre d' talking to a woman. My God, that's Lucille Ball. And there's her daughter, Lucy Arnaz, with her. And I'm kind of fascinated looking at Lucy. I'm doing my trick. And I see her hand the maitre d' a business card. When I finished my act, I got backstage in my dressing room, and the maitre d' came back and gave me the card and said, "Lucille Ball wants you to come to her party." I thought, oh, she wants some free magic performance. That isn't what she wanted at all. But, so I went, met Lucille, we talked a bit, and one thing Lucille did not want to talk about offstage or offset was show business. You don't talk show business. She wants to talk about anything else in life, what are you doing, you know. Show business was a taboo subject, and she was a killer backgammon player. I played backgammon with her at her party till the sun came up in the morning, drinking. Gary Morton, her husband, was there, the comic Gary Morton, her second husband after she divorced Desi Arnaz. And she was very pleasant. She was very wonderful. Now, here's the thing about Lucy. I do remember one thing she said. "Oh, I'm so tired of being me." You know what that means? the public knew her as the frizzy, red-haired, airheaded Lucy on television. She always portrayed that, you know. Every time she's out in public or with somebody, they expected her to be that. She had a low, deep voice, a gravelly voice even, and she didn't do the Lucy thing, the airheaded. She was normal. That was her. She had to act all the time to be Lucy, and she said, "I'm so tired of being me." That's what she meant by that.
Wow. She ended up using your name.
Yes, I have the TV DVD. On one of the television shows she did with Desi Arnaz, she used my name 4 times in that show. She told me, she said, "Well, I can't use your full name because you're not a member of AFTRA and it would be complicated. You don't have a card, blah, blah, blah." She said, "Even though it would register as a fictitious name, but you are real, and your manager could get in touch with us and say, we want to be paid for that." Well, it was complicated anyway. I don't remember what she said exactly, but she said, "But I'll get your name on TV." So she used Mr. Hayden 4 times. And now Hayden is not a common name, it's an unusual name, so she meant me.
That's
Yeah.
pretty
She was
rough.
very pleasant. She was wonderful. And she wasn't trying to be funny, didn't say funny stuff. If she said anything funny, it came out as funny. She didn't intend it.
No.
But you couldn't beat her at backgammon. She was a killer, and I'm a lousy player, but I enjoyed playing.
So how about Peter?
Peter Lawford.
Huh? How did you meet Peter Lawford? And
I met him on an ocean liner. An ocean liner out of Piraeus, Greece. Peter Lawford and June Alyson, who I'd worked with twice. June Alyson, a movie star. Peter Lawford and Rita Hayworth were the stars on this, I think they called it a nostalgia crew or something like that. So they had movies in the ship's theater of all of their pictures all through the trip. You know, every day a different June Alyson movie or a Peter Lawford movie and so forth. Rita Hayworth. And Peter was one of the stars, and we kind of hit it off. And he thought I was pretty funny. I used him in my magic act. He said, "Go ahead, dump on me, do anything you want, whatever." So, and his fiancée, his wife-to-be, before he died, Pat, was there too. And that's also where I met and had dinner with Sarah Churchill, the daughter of Winston Churchill. Sarah was a hoot. So Peter and I hit it off. He thought I was funny, and Peter, being a movie star, he had a great sense of humor. He was one of the original members of the Rat Pack, as you know. And he became disenfranchised with Frank Sinatra, who pushed him out of the Rat Pack.
why?
Well, back then, John F. Kennedy was president. By the way, I shook hands with John Kennedy. This hand. And I haven't washed it since. And Peter was Jack Kennedy's brother-in-law. He married Pat Kennedy, Jac Kennedy's sister, as you know. Well, he was on the ship, and we became good friends. And after the trip was over, I think that was 2 weeks on board that ship, we disembarked in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Peter gave me his home address and his phone number. He said, "Let's keep in touch." So I did, and we became good buddies. So I met him on the ship.
So what happened with Kennedy and Lawford, and why did Frank Sinatra ostracize him?
Well, at that time, Jack Kennedy was going to make a trip to California, whether he was campaigning for something or other, or just seeing the country or whatever. He was coming to California for a reason. Peter Lawford lived in California, as did Sinatra. And at that time, Peter Lawford was part of the Rat Pack. And Peter Lawford made arrangements to have Jack Kennedy stay at Frank Sinatra's mansion. Frank Sinatra spent, at that time, I remember it was quite a figure, $80,000 or something, to add an extra big room for Jack Kennedy, private room, on the side of his mansion, adjacent to the swimming pool and the golf course or whatever, luxury. President Kennedy was coming to stay with Frank Sinatra. Bobby Kennedy, who was then Attorney General, said, no, Frank is pretty much connected with the mob. He said, you can't stay there. It won't be good for you. You're President of the United States. Bobby Kennedy made arrangements for him to stay at Bing Crosby's house, which he did. Sinatra, because Peter Lawford was the liaison between Sinatra and Kennedy, Sinatra got mad and couldn't blame President Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy. He couldn't have a tirade against either of them. They're Attorney General of the United States and the President there. So he dumped on Peter Lawford and got mad at him because he made the arrangements for him to stay at his house, and he spent all the thousands of dollars building a room for Kennedy, and then Kennedy stayed with Bing Crosby. So that was Peter's axe from Frank Sinatra's right back.
Isn't there something to do with the girl too? Him dating a girl and Frank having a phone sent to his table?
Yeah, they were at Chasen's one night having dinner with Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner at the time was on and off with Frank Sinatra. In fact, as I've read several places, she was number one with Frank of all the women he knew. And Peter had a date with her one night. He's having dinner with her at Chasen's. The maitre d' brought a phone over to the table and said, Mr. Lawford, there's a call for you. Put the phone down, plugged it in. Hello, it was Frank. Says, you ever date her again, I'm going to have your legs broken. And he hung up. That was the call from Frank.
Wow. So that's how Peter ended up out of the Rat Pack overall.
According to Peter, yeah. And then he ostracized him. And Peter did a lot less movies. We don't quite know why, but Peter assumed why.
Yeah. Wow. So he had a lot of connections with Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
To get things done. He could keep you out if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So you traveled the country doing supper clubs, playing supper clubs, and you traveled the world probably 7 or 8 times over on cruise ships.
Round and around the world. Probably I have flown 6 million miles altogether. With the Air Force show, we flew every day. 5:30 in the morning, we're on the flight line every day to do a show in the next theater of operation. It was taxing. It was a whirlwind. But I was 21 years old. All of us were in that show. We could handle it. We're young airmen, We were strong.
You were kind of scrawny back then, trying to get into the Air Force.
I was 97 pounds when I tried to get in the Air Force. And the limit was you had to be at least 100 pounds. I wasn't. I was 3 pounds under. So I went to Syracuse for my examination. After the recruiting sergeant had signed me up at the Syracuse post office there, I had an appointment to go for my physical to join the Air Force. The doctor who examined me said, well, you're okay. Everything else looks good except you're underweight. I can't take you in. And he said, you really want to get in the Air Force? So that's why I'm here. Yes, I want to, because I wanted to wear a uniform at that time because all my buddies had done the same, and I was not. I had been in mortuary school while they were wearing uniforms. I said, yes, I want to get my obligation over with. Back then, it was an obligation for every young male to serve the country. It was a biggie. Today it's not so. He said, well, I'm going to do something for you. He said, but don't spread it around. Don't tell them I did it. He says, I'm going to have the government pay for you a room at the Hotel Syracuse. You stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning when you get up, find yourself a supermarket, buy some bananas, eat 3 pounds of them, weigh them in the store so you know how many bananas is 3 pounds. It was like, I think it was 6 bananas. Each banana weighed a half a pound, apparently, something like that. I ate those damn things till I could almost throw them up. He said, the doctor told me, he said, eat these just before you come for your exam in the morning. I did. I went. I weighed exactly 100 pounds. He said, you're in. That's how I got in the Air Force.
Wow. That's amazing, Jack. Well, look, we've done 45 minutes.
Have we?
Yes. And I'm sure that people are going to have some questions.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have to, this is going to go on. I mean, I'll come back over. We'll do another interview.
Okay.
Okay. But for now, and my battery's running low. Just gave me a warning. So thank you very much, Jack.
Okay.
All right.
It was fun.
Yeah, we'll do another one.
Sure.
Sound good?
Why not?
All right.
See ya.
Thank you all for watching this video. Please hit the like button, the share, and don't forget, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions for Jack, I'm sure we're going to have him on again, so leave the questions in the comments below. Thanks again.